Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is Bava Metzia daf Chaf Tet. We are at the Mishnah on Chaf Chet. I'm going to share my screen and we will get started. Okay, so we're at the Mishnah, so we'll just jump right in. The Mishnah is going to address what a finder can do with the lost object while waiting to return it. So, kol davar she'oseh v'ochel, anything that has the ability to work and to then eat the produce of its work, meaning that it can produce enough revenue for the person who's watching it, so that they will be able to care for the item. And Rashi says, "Kol davar she'oseh v'ochel im avedazu." If this lost item, davar sheyacholin shelahechilo, that it's able to cause it to eat at schar ma'asav, the value of the earnings of its work, kigon shor, like an ox, v'chamor, and a donkey, yasev yochal, then it should go ahead and do the work, and then it will eat the produce of what it produces. Below yim koroto, don't sell it. Hamotze, the person who finds it, should not sell it. Im shahu ba'alav mulidarsho, if the owner takes his time to search out and find it. Now, why is it important that you do this? Rashi actually tells us, Shekol adam noachlo, everybody prefers behemto shekirubo, that his animal is the one that recognizes him kvar already, velimda lirtsono, and understands his desires. So as a result, when you are dealing with something that is fungible, well, then maybe you should go ahead and sell it. That way you don't have to have any expenses associated with it, and it's fine. But when you've got something that is so particular that in fact you want to make sure that the person gets back the original item, well, then you're going to, and it's able to take care of itself through its work, well, then you are going to want to allow it to work and pay for its own food. So then, yaseh v'yochal, it should eat work and it should eat from the proceeds.
Where do we come from this concept of selling something? If someone has an object, isn't he supposed to hold it until the original owner comes back to get it?
That is exactly the topic of today's daf, that we're going to see that it's not an unlimited blank check, that if I lose something and you find it, Ken, you don't have unlimited durational liability for holding it and taking care of it, etc. And indeed, it doesn't make sense that you'll do it, because we'll see that in the Mishnah that we're about to see. The davar she'ein oseh v'ochel, if something you find something that doesn't have the ability to cover it, it doesn't work, but it does eat, meaning it takes money to take care of it, yimacher, then you should sell it. Shene'amar, because what does the Torah tell us? V'heshivosolo, you have to return it to him. Re'eh hech tishivenulo, you got to figure out how you can get something back to him. As Rashi tells us, in the next Rashi, again, we're in the Mishnah in Kavchet Amabet, second to last Rashi in the Mishnah, on the Mishnah. Because what happens if it eats half of its value? So then you're going to have to, then the finder is going to have to pay for that. You're not really returning the item to him. So again, if you were to find my baby cow, and you were to feed it enough food so that it ends up eating more than its value, I would have to pay you for all of that, Ken, and that wouldn't be right for me. I wouldn't want to do that. So as a result, effectively, we know that therefore, we're going to say that you should sell it, and then if I successfully come up with the explanation, with the signs that show that I was the owner of that baby cow, well, then you can return the proceeds of that sale to me. So, my yahe b'damim, what should be done with the money? So we have a machlokas. Rabbi Tarfon Omer yishtamesh bahen, that you can work with them. You can use the money It's a loan effectively. But as a result, it's a loan. You have to pay it back fully, meaning that if you end up losing any of the money, you're going to be responsible for that. Rabbi Akiva Omer lo yishtamish behen, that you don't get to use the money. If you don't get to use the money, and therefore you are not responsible for any losses associated with the money. And
so what's the case here? If a person loses an object, and let's say he has a responsibility to machriz, and then 2 years go by, 3 years go by, he sells it. So then the original owner says, "Oh, I realized this. I saw the sign, it was lost." He comes back to claim it, and the fellow says, "What are the simanim?" The person who sold it doesn't remember himself what the simanim, unless he writes it down, marks it. I mean, that's a lot of work on his part. He may not even remember the simanim that the owner was supposed to give to him to prove that it was his object if it was years have gone by.
That's an excellent question. And I'm not 100% sure of the answer. I would assume that you have to somehow write it down, all the signs, or at least the most likely signs, so that you can be able to give it back to the right person. But you ask an excellent question, and we have not, at least through today's daf and the beginning of tomorrow's daf, we have not yet answered that question. So, but hopefully we will answer it as we move forward. So I'm not able to give you a good answer to that question, other than to say that yes, in fact, we expect the person to know what the signs were, so that in fact, if the person comes back, and he's able to give it to the right person who has the signs. Obviously, in today's world, we can take a picture of it, and that way you can use the picture. But
the finder of, let's say, a skier or see the markings, and wouldn't he have an obligation to make it available to the Bet Din so they can announce it?
Yeah, no. So the process, it would be as follows. I find your baby cow. Baby cows don't work, so as a result, it's going to eat up very quickly its full value. I'm going to quickly sell it. Let's say it's worth $500. I now have $500. I'm going to announce, and I'm not going to sell it like that day. We'll see exactly how long I should hold on to it, but I'm going to announce it in the various places that I'm supposed to announce it, and then for the period of time that I'm supposed to announce it. And if you come and say, "Hey, I've got it," so then I need to somehow know. Ken is highlighting. I need to know the signs. So that's the situation. So, all right, Ula Olam, does the person have to keep it forever? This is touching on, Ken's question. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Shmuel, Ad Beis Kodesh. No, you only have to keep the item, even if it works and eats, for 12 months. Okay. So the Tanya Nami Haki, and we have a brisa that teaches the exact same concept. Kol davar she'osav, everything that works and eats, could go in para v'chamor, like a cow or a donkey. Mitapel bahen ad yud beis kodesh. You've got to take care of it for 12 months. Mikan ve'elach sham demehen. You figure out, you estimate their money, umanechan, and you put it away, meaning that you sell it and you put away the money. Agalim usiachim, when it comes to calves and young donkeys, which presumably cannot do that kind of work, mitabo behen shlosha chadashim. Then you're going to care for them for 3 months. These are, again, so that although the expense is material, it's not going to be so great. You'll handle it for 3 months, and you'll get paid back when the original owner comes and collects. Mikan ve'elech sham demehen umanicha. So then again, you estimate the value and you put it aside. Avozim v'sarnagolim. When it comes to male geese and roosters, so mitaba behen shloshim yom. So then you only do it for 30 days. Mikan ve'elech sham demehen. You figure out the value umanicha, and then you put it away. So Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak tarnagoles b'kibehema gasa. A hen, a female chicken, is going to be is treated like a large animal because it lays eggs, so it's very productive. So Tayanami Hakim, we got a brisa that supports that concept, because it says tarnagolas uvehemagasa when it comes to a hen and a large animal. You work for them for 12 months. So then you estimate the value and you put them aside. When it comes to calves and young donkeys, you work them for 30, you take care of them for 30 days. And then after that, you put them aside. When it comes to male geese and roosters that are worth that don't produce anything near what it eats, so then you can just care for them for 3 days. And from that point on, you put them aside. Now we had 2 sets of things that had different time frames from the earlier brisa. It seems like young calves and young donkeys is different from what we had before, because the first brisa said 3 months and this brisa says 1 month, says 30 days. And then we had a dispute between the male geese and the roosters, and the male geese and the roosters, because one said 30 days and one said 3 days. So when it comes to the calves and young donkeys, that's not going to be a problem. So one case is where we're dealing with them able to graze. So you're dealing with a season where it's easy to get food, and as a result, it's less expensive because you just send them out. They have the ability to eat on their own. And Hadabituma, but in the times when it's not, when there's no food out in the field, and they're not going to be able to just go out and graze for a relatively low cost, and you have to fatten them, well, then that's going to be more expensive. And so as a result, that's where it's 30 days. So 3 months would be the longer time, and 30 days is the shorter time if you have to be fattening them. And when it comes to these ganders and roosters, when it comes to the male geese and the roosters, so then again, it's not a contradiction, because one is where there's large ones, meaning that they're, as Rashi puts it, that they're eating a lot. 1, 2, 3, 5 lines from the bottom of Rashi on Kafchet Amabeb. Ravarve Ochlin Harbe, they eat a lot. Hilko Kimu Yamim. Therefore, you only have to give them 3 days. Because these, we're dealing about male ones. They're not going to be productive. So that's the explanation. And we've now concluded that piece of the puzzle. And so the bottom line is that it's a sliding scale. Everything will eventually get sold. And the question is just how long do you give them? Some will give them a full year. And so this actually can partially answer Ken's question, because the answer to the question is that if the person doesn't come within the relevant time frame, maybe you don't have to keep in mind all of the different signs. And only for the first year do you need to keep in mind the signs. And after that, it's tough luck on the person who lost them. The she'ena osava ochel. Now we said that when it comes to something that does not eat, does not work and eat, meaning it doesn't pay for itself. Now we're going to explain what with a brisa, what the Mishnah was trying to tell us, that you have to return it to him. See how you can return something to him. That you don't want to feed to the value of a calf to calves, and you don't want to feed the value of a young donkey to young donkeys. And same, you don't want to do the same thing with the male geese and the roosters. So as a result, the point is that we got to make sure that you return something to the guy. So Mayahe Bedamim, Rabbi Tarfon, Omer Yishtamesh v'chulu. So next piece of our Mishnah was that we explained that there's a machlokas between Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva. that, and they're arguing about what can be done with the money. So ad kan lo pligi, it seems like that Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva only argue ela kishenish tamish behen, only the fact, now it doesn't really mean kishenish tamish, means literally that when they use the money, but it's really the right to use the money. It's not understood. So, and in fact, Rashi says, lav dafka. It doesn't really mean that it was actually used. El mishum skar shimush. It's the value of being able to use. Ka'amar. Because you're allowed to use them according to Rabbi Tarfon. But if in fact we were to deal with a situation where you could not use them, im avdu pater, it seems like if the item was lost, you would be exempt. So lema to have to the Rav Yosef. Now this is going to be a callback, good opportunity to do a little chazara, because Rav Yosef taught us way back. Gosh, I don't remember even when. Let's see when. I'm sorry that I'm not remembering exactly when we saw this, but Rav Yosef had said the Itmar Shomer Aveda, that in fact the person who's watching a lost item is not considered a Shomer Chinam, but here's the debate. Rabba Omer Kashomer Chinam. Rabba tells us that he's like a Shomer Chinam. Rav Yosef Omer Kashomer Sachar, and Rav Yosef says he's like a paid watcher. And so as a result, a paid watcher does have liability if the person were to lose the item. So take a look, Rashi Kashomer Sachar, the first narrow line on Rashi, V'chayev b'geneva v'aveda. If you're like a Shomer Sachar, you're obligated in Geneva and Aveda. The Shomer Sachar mitzvah that why is and why is he a Shomer Sachar? Because he's performing a mitzvah. And ozek b'mitzvah pater min a mitzvah. And somebody who's involved in a mitzvah is exempt from performing other mitzvah. So, namely, as we saw earlier, that you don't have to necessarily give tzedakah while you're involved with working with the animal. So, as a result, Rav Yosef says that you're actually like a Shomer Sachar, and therefore you would be subject to paying for the loss. Well, that seems inconsistent with our Mishnah, which seems to suggest that both Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva would both agree that the person who's watching the found item is like a Shomer Chinam. So Amar Lach Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef would tell you, you know what? It's not. I can explain our Mishnah so that both Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva are consistent with my view.
Because Rashi? Where's the Rashi here?
Kashomer Sachar. It's the first line, first narrow line on Kaf Tet Amud Aleph. You're obligated in if you're like a Shomer Sachar, you're obligated in paying for the loss associated with theft and loss. If you lose the item, the Shomer Sachar, and the person's a Shomer Sachar because mitzvah, he's performing a mitzvah, da osik min mitzvah, pater min a mitzvah. If you're involved in one mitzvah, you're exempt from performing other mitzvah. So Amar Lach Rav Yosef, back into the Gemara, right? So now we're 1, 2, 3, fourth line down, third word from the end of the line. Amar Lach Rav Yosef, Piganeva Vaveda, Dukuli Alma Lo Pligi Dechayev. No, I would tell you that both Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Akiva would agree that when it comes to theft and loss, you do have to pay for these things, and it's in part because you're treated like a paid watcher. Ki pligi, where is it that they disagree? And there's this disagreement about whether or not you're liable for them. But owns it to Shoel only when we're dealing with something that was a complete accident, which a borrower is liable for. So again, there are, each kind of watcher has its own level of liability. A borrower is liable even for something that happens accidentally. It could be totally not the borrower's fault, but we're going to say that he's going to be liable. Whereas an unpaid, even a paid watcher will not be liable for that kind of accident. And so as a result, when we're talking about the liability in our Mishnah, we're talking about liability for an absolute accident. Rabbi Tarfon says, Sharule Rabbanan Ishtamushi Begabayu, because the rabbis gave you the permission to use the money, Bahabalai Shoel Alayu, you're like a borrower. Rabbi Akiva Savar, and Rabbi Akiva says, no, lo Sharule Rabbanan Ishtamushi Begabayu. The rabbis didn't give you the permission, and Hilkach lo Habi Shoel Alayu, you're not like a borrower, rather you are like a paid watcher. Well, one second. The Rabbi Akiva in the Mishnah says that because you can't use it, therefore you're not going to be liable. What kind of therefore is it? Now, if you were to tell me that the argument between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon was about theft and loss, well, then that makes sense. That's why Rabbi Akiva says, Omer lo yishtamish behem, you're not allowed to use it. And therefore you're not going to be responsible. Because I might have thought Shomer Sachar Havi Rav Yosef. Maybe you should say that the person who's watching it is considered like a paid watcher, and therefore he would be liable for theft and loss. And that's why we say, therefore, he's not going to be. But But now you're telling me that Rabbi Akiva is saying that you can't use the money, and Shomer Sachar lo habi, and he's not even a paid watcher, and he's not even considered liable for theft or loss. And so now that you tell me that you're not allowed to use it, Shomer Sachar lo habi, he's not considered even a paid watcher, and he's not obligated even for theft and loss. But if everybody agrees that even Rabbi Akiva agrees that you are liable for theft and loss, and they're only arguing about whether or not you also have the liability of a borrower. Why is Rabbi Akiva using the term lefikach? It should have said Rabbi Akiva Omer lo yishtamish behem. Rabbi Akiva just says, don't use it. And I would know because you can't use it. Lav shoel habi. He's not a borrower. And he's not liable for any kind of accident that occurs. Meaning the point is that if in fact the argument is only on this narrow issue of whether you're liable for an accident, there isn't anything else that could be that if he's disagreeing with Rabbi Tarfon, then there's nothing else that he could say. Meaning it must be that he's disagreeing on this point. Lefikach the Rabbi Akiva lamali there. Why do I need the word lefikach? So Rabbi Yosef would give you the following answer: Mishum lefikach to Rabbi Tarfon, because we're using parallel language. Because Rabbi Tarfon says lefikach. One second. Lefikach to Rabbi Tarfon lamali. Why do I need the lefikach of Rabbi Tarfon in the first place? Meaning maybe the entire Mishnah should not bother with that word. Hagi kamar. So no, this is what Rabbi Tarfon is saying. Because the rabbis gave him permission to use it, it's as if he has already used it. Meaning, even if he never actually touches the money and he left it all in his side room, I might have thought that in that situation, Rabbi Tarfon would say, hey, look, I understand that you were allowed to use it, but you didn't actually use it, so I'm going to treat you like a Shomer Sachar and not make you liable for an accident that happens. But no, in fact, we are going to say, Lefikach b'chayav b'achariyusan. He's responsible for an accident that happens, even if he never actually uses the money. Now, the problem with all of this explanation is because our Mishnah said, Abdu Katani. Our Mishnah explicitly said, if we go back to our Mishnah at the bottom of Kavchet Amabet, what did our Mishnah say? Our Mishnah said, where is it? Here it is. So Rabbi Akiva Omer lo yishtamish behen lefikach im avdu ein chay b'achariyusan. If it was lost, well, loss implies liability. It's not an accident case if it says the word avdu. So we'd answer, you know what? Avdu can work because as we turn to Kavchet Amabet, Kida Rabba, it's like Rabba explains, the Amar Rabba, Nignavu Balista Mizuyan. when we say that something is stolen, we're not talking about, and this is in a different context, that reference to stolen talks about an armed robber. It's not a case of liability. And similarly, Avdu, when we talk about loss, Shitagu Sfina Sobayam, it's where his ship sank at sea. We're not talking about any kind of liability situation. It was a total accident. It was totally against his control. He didn't put it in a place where a thief could easily steal it. He didn't wasn't careless in the way he ran the ship. It was a total accident. And so as a result, when we say Avdu here, we're talking about an accident kind of loss, not a liability kind of loss, not a mistake kind of loss, not a loss of that shows a level of responsibility. So I'm Rabbi Yehuda.
I'm thinking Baltimore.
What? Yeah, exactly, 100%. The ship sank at sea. Oh boy! All right, I'm Rabbi Yehuda.
We're talking about lost money, right? The money's in his possession. But
Yes,
what's the nafka? If he loses the money and he found it, if he initially found lost money, someone lost it, the owner wants it back. Money is fungible. So if he had $100, he can give him another $100.
Well, the question is does he have to give that other $100? So let's go through the case, right? So I found Stan's baby cow, and I realized, and Stan didn't come to claim it. Let's say that the baby cow was it was during the time that the fields are not filled with grass. So I was having to feed it from my own feed. And so as a result, I sold it after 30 days. And now I have $500 in my pocket after netting out all the costs of the food that he ate during that first month. And so now I unfortunately somebody let's see what could be my accident. So I'm on my way back from the marketplace where I sold the cow, and highway robbers come and they steal the money from me. So now Stan comes a week later and gives me the signs of his animal. What do I say to him? Am I liable to him for the $500 or not? So according to Rabbi Tarfon, I could have used that money as a borrower, and therefore I'm going to be liable to Stan for that $500. According to Rabbi Akiva, no, I'm not liable for that $500. I don't owe Stan anything. So you're right that money is fungible, but the question is am I liable for paying Stan when he now comes with good signs that show that he was the owner of the baby cow?
You were robbed.
After I was robbed, after I was robbed by armed robbers, where there was nothing I could do about it. So as a result, that's the situation that we're talking about.
But is there a time limit then? We said there's a time limit for holding the animal for 3 months or for 30 days or a year or so forth. But once he sold it, is there a time limit for holding the money that he garnered from the sale? If the time limit is 6 months or 6 years, then I would be obligated to give the money back, to give the owner the money. If he's still holding it in his purse. So if the money was stolen, got washed into the sea, it doesn't matter what money is money.
No, but the point is that according to Rabbi Tarfon, according to Rabbi Akiva, money is money. But the point is that if it got washed into the sea, right? So a wave came and swept it away. There was nothing I could do about it. And so then, according to Rabbi Akiva, I'm not liable. Even if he were to come literally the next day, I would not be liable. So yes, money's fungible, but the question, and yes, the question is the question that you ask of how long does a person have? It's not yet clear to me whether the time limit for announcing, after that time limit, do we say that now it becomes the finders, or do we say that even after that the finder can come? So it seems like to me like we would say that no, that maybe that's the time limit. And so as a result, the answer to your question is if he comes 6 years later, it's too late. It's mine already. But if he comes within that first year, within those first 3 holidays, or within the time frame of my informing the neighbors, so that everybody in the neighborhood knows what that the item was lost. So then the question is would I be liable? So you're assuming that, because even though money is fungible, and therefore if money got washed away, I could just give him other money, but that would come out of my pocket. And so therefore, the debate between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon is very key, is very crucial. Rabbi Akiva would say, I don't have to pay for that because I don't have any rights to borrow the money. Rabbi Tarfon would say, no, you could have borrowed the money, and therefore you have an additional level of liability. And Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, as we pick up the last, with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 line down on Kaftan bet, halacha Rabbi Tarfon, that the halacha is like Rabbi Tarfon. So so now we're going to give an example that relates to this, but is not directly on point. Biyad rachaba hava le hanhu zuze dias me rachaba happened to have some money that belonged to orphans. Also, now you can understand this as being that he found money, or he found an item that belonged to orphans, and now he has sold the item. He has determined, the easiest way to make it completely applicable is that he sold the item and now determined that it actually the money belongs to the orphans. No. He found money that actually belonged to the orphans. Is the easiest way to explain it based on the way the Gemara is going to end. That he found money that belonged to orphans, and so as a result, he has an obligation to return it to them. He figured out who it belongs to, namely these orphans. And the problem is you can't return money to people who are in a position where they're not able to watch it. So the orphans are minors, so he has to hold on to the money until they get older. So also the Rabbi Yosef. So he came in front of Rabbi Yosef. Amrlei, Mahalish to Moshe begabai. Can I use the money? Amrlei, Hachi, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. This is what Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel. Halacha Rabbi Tarfon. The halacha is like Rabbi Tarfon, who says that a finder is allowed to use the money he's holding. So Amar Le Abaye, 1 second, Vilav Idmar Allah, 1 second. Didn't we say about it? Amar of Chelbo, Amar of Huna, Lo Shanu El B'Dmei Aveda. That's only true when you're talking about the money that got received for the sale of a lost object. However, because he had to take care of that item before, at least until he actually sold it. But when it comes to the money itself that was lost, there's no effort that needs to be. You don't need to wash money in order to make sure it stays in good condition. Then you would not be allowed to use them. Bahani, and this money, this money is like money that was lost. Now, either that could be literally because it was lost. Now we know the owner, but he still can't give it back to them. Or we could talk about a case where Rachava just was watching money. He was the apotropos for the orphans, and therefore he had the ability. So Amrle, Rav Yosef says to Rachava, Zil, go, lo shavkuli to Israel. They're not letting me make this permitted to you. So, clearly he on some level disagreed with Abaye, but Abaye had the stronger proof and had and so as a result, in the end, Rechava was not able to use it. So we have a qualification that the only time that we say the halakha is like Rabbi Tarfon that you can use the money is if you sell the lost item after having cared for it. Okay, so now we're going to deal with other items that you might find. So
what happens if it's lost then?
What was that?
If he can use it and it's lost,
then you're going to be liable. Then you're absolutely right. Then you're back into your situation that you're going to be liable for anything that happens to that money because you could have used it. Now, so we have two different situations. So if I find $500 on the street and it's wrapped up very nicely, so it's very clearly has a sign on it, and it says, in fact, it says Kenneth on it. So and it's got other things that it would allow you to indicate the sign. In that situation, I am not allowed to use it. I have to leave it exactly as it is. And so now, if armed robbers come and steal it from me, I am not going to be liable to you, Kenneth, when you come and try to claim it. On the other hand, if you were to have lost a baby cow, and now I sell it and I have $500 of proceeds after paying for the cost associated with feeding it for the month that I was feeding it. So now all of a sudden, now because that's $500 that is the proceeds of a lost item, now I am responsible for it. Even if I don't actually ever use the money, because I have the rights to use the money, if you come and it has been stolen by armed robbers, tough luck on me. I have to pay you the money that you are owed because you have given me good signs to show that you were the owner, the rightful owner of the baby cow. Okay, so now we deal with new items that are found. Matzah Sfarim. Again, this is all about how you deal with the items during the time that you're waiting for the original owner to make the claim. So Matzah Sfarim, you find some books. You should read from them once every 30 days. Again, you want to Rashi makes it clear. שמתאפשן כששוהם מלפותכם וכל ספרים שלהם היו עשויים בגיליון. Everything was in this like a scroll structure, and so we wanted to make sure that that air got to them, and so as a result, you would want to make sure that you use them while the person was waiting for the original owner to come back. If you don't know how to read, go on. You should at least roll them. So Rashi tells us, go on from the beginning until the end, so that the air can get into them. But you shouldn't learn something for the first time. What does it mean, betchila? Rashi tells us, third line, what you haven't learned before. Because when you haven't learned something before, it's going to need to remain open in front of you. You can't just read it at once. You have to go over it and over it in order to figure it out. Okay, so that's abalo yilmo behem. Okay, v'lo yikra achar imo, and nobody else should read it with you. And Rashi tells us, fourth line, because we're worried that both people are going to be reading the same thing, and they're both going to want to pull the scroll towards them, and the scroll is going to tear. So, matzah ksus, if you find something that is a garment, you find a garment. So then, 1 second. If you find a garment, you should shake it out every 30 days. And you should spread it out as it's needed, meaning basically some kind of ironing or smoothing of the garment. But you have to be careful that you're doing it for the benefit of the garment and not for your own honor. Meaning, if you happen to find a painting of you find the Mona Lisa and you know who it belongs to, and now you decide you're going to hang it up in your home, that's not appropriate because that's good. You could get damaged in the sun, etc. that you would have out. So what about silver and copper things? Again, you should use them as is necessary for them. But not so much that you're going to wear them out. You don't want to lose any of the metal that's associated with them. But when it comes to gold or glass, you shouldn't even touch them because until Eliyahu comes to tell us who the owner is, because those things will remain in good condition. So now we're going to have to figure out again if we're going to say that at some point there's no requirement for you to give it back because the owner didn't come. That seems to be contrary to this statement. So that may suggest the answer to our question of whether or not you're liable forever is that yes. And then it becomes really a tough question, Kenneth's question about the fact that hey, how can you say that? How is a person going to even remember all of the signs that are associated with it? In any event, matzah sako kupa, if you find some kind of a sack or a box, the kol davar she'ein darko lito, and we're dealing with something where it's, maybe it's too heavy, or it's not something that you would not ordinarily pick up if it were your own. You don't have no obligation to pick it up. And so as a result, this is the basis for, if something doesn't is not respectful to your honor, if you were to be found walking around with it, so then you don't have to pick up that item. There's no obligation to return that. Okay, so those are the various items in the Mishnah and what you need to do with them while you are waiting to find the owner. So now the Gemara picks up Amar Shmuel Hamotze with an additional item, namely tefillin, which isn't covered, but maybe might be included in the safer category. So Amar Shmuel Hamotze tefillin b'shuk. If you find tefillin in the marketplace, sham demehen, you go immediately to figure out how much they're worth and sell them. And then you set it aside. Massive Ravina. So Ravina challenged this because 1 second, our Mishnah says, and if you don't know how to read, then you should read them once every 30 days. And if you don't know how to read, you should at least roll them every 30 days. Golan in. Doesn't that show that you don't assess their value and put them to the side? Meaning, why would we do that for tefillin but not for books? So Amar Abaye, tefillin be bar chavu mishkach shchiche. No, there are people who are in Bar Chavu's house. You can buy it from Bar Chavu. Svarim lo shchichi, but books are not relevant. You can't just purchase. They're not as fungible. So anything that is easily replaceable by going to a store, you can just simply sell it and hold on to the money, because that's often easier than holding on to the item itself. Tanu Rabbanan Shoel Sefer Torah Mechabero. Now we're going to teach a brisa and go through the brisa line by line. And when we're done with the brisa, we'll have one more piece, and then we'll be done with today. So Tanu Rabbanan Hashol Sefer Torah Mechabero. If you borrow a Sefer Torah from a friend, you're not allowed to lend it to somebody else. Hosko v'koribo. If you're allowed to open, you can open it and you can read it. But you're not allowed to study something in it for the first time. Now we're going to, because the bottom line is that is going to be a usage that is not necessarily the usage that we're going to assume that you intend. We assume that you're going to just try to read it for Torah reading and not to study in it. Lo yikara acherimo, and nobody else should read it with you. V'chein hamafkid sefer Torah le'etzel chavero. And similarly, if one leaves a Torah with a friend in order to watch it, golo kol shneim asar kodesh, he should roll it every 12 months. Posko b'koribo, he should open it and read it. Im b'shvilo psacho, but if he opens it for himself, asur, that's prohibited. So that seems a little bit inconsistent, because first he said he should open it and read it, and then he says that if you should open it for your own purposes, it's asur. So we'll explain that in a moment. Sumchas Omer, Sumchas says b'chadash. When it comes to a new Torah scroll, shloshim yom, you should do it every 30 days. B'yashem, when it comes to an older one, shnei masar chodesh, you should do it every 12 months. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says echad zeh ve'echad zeh shnei masar chodesh. Either way, you should do it every 12 months. Okay, so Amar Mar Hashol Sefer Torah Mechabero Harei Lo you should lend a locker. You shouldn't lend it to somebody else. So my area Sefer Torah, I feel kol milenami. Everything. If I borrow something from Stan, I can't go and lend it to Charlie because Stan didn't indicate that Charlie was somebody that he would rely on. So because the Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, in fact, we have the statement of Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish that we saw in Maseches Gittin. Kan Shana Rabbi, here Rabbi taught Ein Hashol Rashai Lahashil. A borrower is not permitted to lend to somebody else. Ve'ein hasocher Rashai Lahaskir, and a renter is not permitted to rent it to somebody else unless you get permission. You cannot have a sub-leaser. You cannot have a sub-borrower. Sefer Torah, no, maybe we need to tell us the law by a Sefer Torah explicitly, because I might have thought maybe a person wants mitzvot to be done with his possessions, and so as a result, presumably he is fine with his Torah being lent to another person. Kamash Malan. That's why the Tana tells us, no, don't lend a Sefer Torah, just like you don't do for anybody else, anything else. You don't lend a Sefer Torah or anything else to a third party. Poscho v'kol we said that you can open it and you can read it. Pshita, it's obvious. Why did you borrow it if not to open it and read it? No, Seifa Itzrachalei. The point of that statement is to distinguish it from the later the next comment in the brisa, which says you shouldn't study anything in it for the first time, because again, as we saw in our Mishnah, that requires more time for the Sefer Torah to be open, and the lender didn't necessarily have in mind that you would be allowed to do that. So we said that you should roll it every 12 months, and you can open it and read it. Well, 1 second. What business does he have with the Torah that he's opening it and reading it? And moreover, im bishvilo sacho asur. The next words are, if you open it for yourself, it's forbidden. So but you just said you can open it and read it. So how is it consistent to say that you can open it and read it, and that if you open it for your own purposes, it's forbidden? So hakikamar, this is probably what you assumed that it meant. Im kashahu go low. If in fact while he's rolling it, he also opens it and reads it, because if you think about it, right, the Torah does not, when you roll it from one Eitz Chaim to the other, you can do that with the Torah closed completely. You just are rolling it and you don't see it. Or you could do it with the Torah open. So if you do it with the Torah open, so then that is okay. So mutter, but mutter im bishvilo psacho. But if you in fact open it for itself in order to do that, well, then it's prohibited. So if you open it in order to make rolling easier, so then you're allowed to read while you're doing it. But if in fact you open it for your own purposes in order to read it, then that would be prohibited. Sumka says b'chodesh shloshim yom b'shiyashan shnei masar chodesh. When it comes to a new one, you do it every 30 days. When it comes to an old one, you do it every 12 months. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, echad zeh ve'echad zeh shnei masar chodesh. Rabbi Eliezer says that you do it every 12 months. Well, 1 second. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Hainu Tanakama. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov's statement is identical to the statement of the Tanakama. Ella Ema, because again, the Tanakama said in that brisa that you roll it every 12 months. So Ella Ema, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer, echad zeh ve'echad zeh shloshim yom. No, so what Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov was saying is really every one, whatever the age of the Torah, you should roll it every 30 days. And that, of course, makes Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, who is usually the way we paskin, consistent with our Mishnah, which referenced opening Sfarim every 30 days. So that's also another positive. Now, our Mishnah said that you shouldn't learn from the item if you from something that you haven't learned previously. And you shouldn't have somebody else read with you. But 1 second, listen to this brisa and see if you can spot the contradiction. You're not allowed to read a portion and then review it while you're taking care of an item. And you shouldn't read it and translate it, again, because you're leaving it open for too long. And you shouldn't open it more than 3 columns at a time. And you shouldn't have 3 people read it at the same time. Whoa! 1 second. You just said you can't have 3 people read it. Our Mishnah said Hashnayim Korin. We said that there's a problem with and the implication, therefore, is that 2 people could read it. But we said in our Mishnah that 2 people can't read it either. So Amar Abaye lo kasha, I can resolve this difficulty. It's not really that tough. Kan be'inyan echad. One case is where 2 people are trying to read the same passage. Kan b'shnei inyanim. And the other case is where people are reading different passages. So if you're reading different passages, so then 2 people can read from the Torah at the same time, even if the Torah is borrowed. But when you're having 2 people read the same passage, or 3 people read no matter how many passages it is, then it's going to be a problem. And again, the problem is that we're worried that somebody will pull it towards them, and the other person will pull it towards them, and they will end up tearing the garment, tearing the scroll. And so as a result, that is our, we'll stop there at the 2 dots, and we will pick up, God willing, from there tomorrow. So whoops, I did not scroll for that last little bit. So there you go. And stay tuned as we pick up with our analysis of the Mishnah and the obligations involved in caring for a found garment.
So what happened? 2 people are not allowed to, but 3
That's your
people.
cost.
2 people are not allowed. If I borrow your Sefer Torah, Moshe and I cannot read from it together if we're reading the same portion. If we're reading 2 different pieces that are near each other, then we can assume that we're okay, that we're not going to pull it towards us because we're separate. We're reading 2 different portions. I'm reading the piece that's in front of me. Moshe's reading the piece that's in front of him. But if we were to also include Stan in that, and the 3 of us were to be reading it together, then we would be worried that somebody would be feeling left out and would pull the scroll towards them, and it could rip. So those are the various cases that we end up with, and in this conclusion.
The 2 pieces that the 2 different people are reading could be on the same page.
Yes,
You have to be close enough together that they could read it simultaneously, but they're not the exact same passage.
Exactly. They have to be, and maybe they shouldn't even be on the same column. I would think that they should not be on the same column, because if they're on the same column, really, is that any different from reading the same passage? I think that it really has to be like a separate column, so that what is in front of me, I'm reading, and what's in front of you, you're reading. And as a result, we have no incentive to pull the scroll towards us. But if, in fact, we're reading from the same column, well, then each of us really have that same incentive to pull it towards us. So that's the way I'm understanding it when we say inyanim. And really, inyanim means topics. So usually a particular column will be all one topic. And so as a result, that's the way I'm going to interpret it. I think that's the most logical understanding.
You could visualize a scenario where they want to read, each one wants to read a different passage, and one would still have to pull the sefer towards him in order to read that passage, which is a few columns distinct or different from the column that the first person is reading.
Well, in that situation, rather than pulling, the person can unroll it. And so as a result, the unrolling can suffice. Whereas if you're reading the same column, unrolling it more doesn't really help.
Oh, okay.
So that's the way I'm understanding it. Have a fabulous day. Looking forward to continuing our learning tomorrow.